for this session, I am with probably the person who, and she's going to contradict me on this, I know, but in my opinion, has had most effect on the arts in East Anglia over the last half century. The amazing Tarby Davenport, who's been a lifelong friend. Well, not quite for my first 17 years, but since I was about 17 years old, our paths have crisscrossed. And later on, actually, she's probably the main reason I've managed to earn a living as an artist for the last 40 years. And there's a lot of people besides me that could say that. And I first met Tarby when you lived in Bramford.
Good God.
You were still with Bob. You were both away. That's Bob Davenport. I keep saying this, and I don't have to. And I have to keep. They keep reminding me that the whole world won't know who I mean by Bob. And you were both away, and Gaz and I went to babysit for you when Sarah was a baby.
Oh.
That's so how old's Sarah now?
50, I don't know, 58 or what?
50. Yes, Liam will know. Anyway, so and then, so I'm not sure if I even met you. Well, you must have done, because we must have had. So Gaz is John Gaisley, who's picture restorer and lived up in a caravan up in Bramford, up on thing. I was at art school with. So I must have met you, because we wouldn't have just abandoned Sarah as a baby, waiting for you to come back. So we might have done. I don't think we did. It were those kind of times. And then, so he probably said hello. And then the next time I'm actually conscious was I moved into my first London flat in Tooting with my old mate Chris Matthews, who I was at another college with, Teach Training College. And I could get everything I owned into the back of a minivan. Now I've got a warehouse full of junk. And so I don't even think I gave you the petrol money for this. I probably didn't. But you drove my junk and John Gaisley down to my flat in Tooting in a light green minivan. Now you probably had a van for moving musical equipment at that point, because it was before you got into furniture. And then there was you were just a name that kept coming through, and I didn't even connect the events. And then Dave Pardew, who I did a scrap round with, and we were en route if we ever picked up any furniture.
Yeah.
And so we reconnected back. So it was about the early 70s, mid 70s, and so every time Tarby used to, before she became this incredibly successful weaver of other people's dreams, making their dreams work, or weaving dreams herself with open air events, and subsidise that. And this is a very East Anglian thing. We all subsidised what we did with other stuff. I did a bit of scrap and rubbish clearance. Tarby stripped furniture, and but this kept not only artists going, but you kept half the alternative East Anglia alive with your furniture stripping business. So, what are your memories of that, of those sort of times?
Quite strange, but I can remember all sorts of people stripping furniture I'd never thought would do it, but they needed money, they needed some support. And because I needed people to strip furniture because I couldn't do that much. Well, I could, but I hadn't got time. They used to do it for me.
Yeah. So and I was I was one of those people that would occasionally turn up and dip another, and we it was ridiculous, wasn't it? We were dipping this painted pine, wasn't it, in a tank of caustic soda, and pulling it out, and then scrubbing using wire wool, wasn't it, to get off all the paint. It was extraordinarily hard. I think it was quite hard graft, wasn't it?
It was.
And and at that point, somewhere, yeah, was it Steve who was living here at the time? Yes. So you were at the time. And you said, "Why don't you come to the fairs, John?" You said, "I was already performing. I was performance poetry. I was doing Edinburgh, and I'd call in here on the way back from Edinburgh Festival, or if I'd been to Cambridge Folk Festival." And I said, "Why don't you come to the fairs?" And I came a couple of times as a, just, I think I even paid. Probably the last time I paid to come to an event in my life. No, I paid occasionally for yours because the mantra was, and quite rightly so, if you're a friend of mine, if you were a friend of mine, you'd pay so I didn't lose money. And I used to work on the same principle at Manor Born. And so you were quite instrumental in getting the fairs going. Would you care to say something about the fairs and how?
Well, the fairs went on for ages and ages, and there were loads of them, and they were all. One of my objections to the first fairs that they had all the same performers, and I wanted it all to change. Wanted different performers brought in every fair, so you were seeing something different, not just trailing a performer around or something like that. So that was one of the places I started to change it all. And used to try and find interesting people to come in.
Yeah, I think it is one of the, not just to East Anglian arts, but it's your contribution to the national arts. I think the place that, and you were sort of instrumental in encouraging this, is walkabout performers, interesting walkabout performers. It wasn't just people walking around in costume, but there was, and there was people quite that had their own television shows and things, but they would come because they could experiment at the fairs. So would you, do any come to mind? The guy with the three heads.
Oh yes, God, who the hell was that? Can't remember. Cunning Stunts was one of them, wasn't it?
Oh yes, Cunning Stunts, which was Jan Dungy.
Yeah.
And and there were wonderful sort of spontaneous groups of musicians. So Jan Dungy was fiddle, wasn't she?
Yeah.
And Rory McLeod would, and Rory McLeod still acts very much as a singer, a multi-instrumentalist, and he still acts in very much the same way. He'll take the booking and then he spends the rest of the event wandering around looking for other musicians to jam with in the fields. And there was the Bones Man. Was that Lenny? Lenny, the Bones Man, who played Bones. So that would be the trio that sort of got together and would appear. And the Pink Policeman, of course.
Yeah.
What's his name?
John McKenna.
John McKenna. You see, you have more names in your head than I have. So John McKenna, who's who's a pretty well-known actor, isn't he? And but he turned up at something you did. I always say 3 years ago, but I don't count in the COVID years. It was probably 6 years ago or something. But it suddenly turned up as the pink policeman at something,
Yeah.
uh, uh, which was, and there was all sorts, and people would build these fantastic things that are now almost not commonplace. But any Glastonbury, all the big festivals have these things. But the now this is a name. I have names in my head, and does that happen to you? You're at the tip of your tongue.
Yeah, probably.
Used to build metal thing, come roar through with fire coming out. Began with P. Gone. Packer.
Oh,
Thank you very much, Liam. We've got our prompt here. Tarby's youngest, and so Packer, of course, and he would invent new stuff for you all the time. And so, and I was blown away with these things. I mean, I'd never seen anything like a lot of people, never seen anything like this, and so, and I was. So I started inventing characters, like to do the poetry, the walking about the poetry, and then of course Gwenda Clark was the first
Oh,
person.
yeah.
Like she started bringing poetry into the thing. So Gwenda got hold of me, and I got hold of other people like all the ranters at the time. I think Benjamin Zephaniah came to one or something, and the Total Stockbroker and all that.
Hello, love.
John, you've said the fairs, but you haven't said what.
All right. I'm being interviewed at the moment by the radio. Yeah, I'll phone you back. All right.
I'll just trim that bit out, don't worry.
Yeah. So I've just been roundly told off, having me told off on the last 5 interviews that I don't explain what things are. I just say the fair's like the whole world knows what a fair, and I'll be thinking fun fair. These were strange events, weren't they? They were They was like a combination of ancient rural events and horse fairs and things, and the happenings movement that came in. And people will almost each side will claim that they invented it. I think and in fact it was just that fusion of people moving. East Anglia at that time had a lot of people moving up from London, creatives, and they'd been in New York and places, and then there was Tarby that had come out of, you really come out of the folk scene, hadn't you, more than anything else. And then there were places that had these big horse fairs or rural events.
Bungie, yeah.
Bungie, yeah. And I suppose the whole thing was a sort of a mishmash of all that, and then it created, and it was a very East Anglian thing. I mean, there was the Elephant Fair in Cornwall, which is, I suppose, the only other one that was like it. And between the mid-70s and 82
Probably.
was, and then
A bit later than 82, wasn't it?
maybe I thought maybe it was later. The last one I remember was the workshops down in down near
Greenwich?
not Lebanon Way, the other pretty village. Liam, we need your memory cells all together. Pretty village. And Sarah Partridge was living down there, and Peter Partridge's farm was down there, and they put it on their land. So yeah, it would have been, or just on that Essex-Suffolk border. But it was a series of workshops. we talk about it in the fairs book. You and I had. This is not the first time, and we have had our conversation about these things. 40 years ago, no, quite that.
So is there a book about
There is a book called that you can never find.
Sun in the
The
East.
Sun in the East is, and it's worth looking up because it really is lots of histories of the fairs, and there's a poem in there saying "Where's Tarby?" because because that was a cry that went up continuously because Tarby was sort of integral to the organisation of everything. And
I think I've got a copy somewhere. Not sure.
yeah, I have.
What led you to start doing that then when you came here? You've been putting events on before.
Well, I'd been, because I lived with Bob Davenport, a folk singer. I used to put things on with him and for him. And then I was left, and he didn't earn enough money really. Folk singing was pretty poorly paid then. I had to work. So I was working at the Craft Centre, wasn't I, in London, just to keep us really, and all the kids. And that's where it all started. And kind of moved out from there.
And then I suppose your first big thing up this way was bringing Fairport up to Bury St Edmunds, wasn't it? Where was that before the fairs or?
I think that was kind of no. I think the fairs were going.
Ah, right.
It was early, but it wasn't.
Wasn't that early?
No.
It was to try and get. And the Albion fairs died a death. It just became, well, there's 1,000 reasons. And you still got old people stopping you in the street saying, "When's the next fair going to be, John?" And because that was the thing, it was very youth orientated. They were young, and it was experimental arts, but it was very much local. So, it was all local people would turn up as well, and it was very low cost. I mean, the price of entrance was quite low; everyone could afford to come in. And then what made Tarby essential to our lives was with that attack on the arts when the money started being taken out of the arts, but local authorities were still putting on stuff. Local authorities still had money to put on the arts, and Tarby got the reputation with all the councils as the person who can do. So you'd bring everyone up and say, you'd book us. That was when you started booking people regularly for other stuff. And I remember, and I was just doing poetry then, and I remember that I every time I get interviewed, I say it's Tarby's fault. I'm a storyteller. No, I was gradually getting into storytelling, and I was sitting in this very room on the way back from somewhere, and Tarby said, "It's a shame you're not a storyteller, John. I could give you some money." And I said, "By an amazing coincidence, Tarby, I am." And
What year was that?
actually, I know I can pretty well tell you. I can say it's about 1990 because it's the year I got laid off from the Arts Centre. I got laid off from the Arts Centre. They closed my bookshop.
Yeah.
That was part of the big sort of when the arts started. Eastern Arts started supporting less and less, and nationally arts was supported less and less. And they closed my bookshop, and I was left out in the cold, really. Well, I had this subsidised job really in Colchester Bookshop. My job was to encourage small press stuff, which we did quite successfully. But then then it was closed. There wasn't any reason for going every morning if they weren't going to pay me.
Sure.
And So I was back. So I was determined not to go back to scrap dealing and all the, I mean, I did. I worked for Desmond O'Keefe quite a lot, but that's another story. But I was I'm going to, I need to actually be not just using this stuff to subsidize the art. I need the art to be making the major thing, and simultaneously to that was about the time that the councils were asking Needham Lakes, and I mean, you were instigating quite a lot of that.
Sure.
So what do you remember about that period? Because it was I think it was very important, to keeping things going in East Anglia.
Well, it certainly didn't fall into my lap. I think I had quite a lot of support from a couple of members of Mid Suffolk, who kind of encouraged me as well. God, I can't remember his name. Don't even know what's happened to him. I forget sometimes, I'm so old.
When you came here, did you come with a full network to build everything from
Scratch.
How was it that you became that focal point?
You married to a folk singer once, weren't you?
But that didn't have much to do
No,
with it.
that didn't help around here.
I think because probably I did actually pay everybody, however small. But I couldn't really afford to pay a lot of money. It had to be people who I had contact with.
Yeah, I think that was there was a lot of people were scrabbling around at that point. So it didn't matter, it was that bit, didn't matter how small it was. That was way of getting a day's wages. And we were all in the same boat, I think, to a great extent. But and the artistic network came. How did that? Because you had phenomenal people used to come down, and they would do anything for you. This is the thing. You were that kind of person, not just that personality, but you were the person that when we were all at our lowest, which at that 1990 point, which was pretty dire. That somehow you managed to keep things going. Bless you. So, and I remember this point where the taxman thought you were earning millions.
Oh God, yes.
and sent you this phenomenal bill, and we put on, and there was amongst the because kids had always been an incredibly important part of what you did. So the Halloween, you used to put on Halloween, yearly Halloween at Thornham Parks, and there was a sort of campsite there for sort of London, a London Council one. So all the teenagers from London Council from this borough would come up for a weekend in the country, and they'd be your crew for Thornham Park. I mean, they'd all sleep in the huts and be your crew for the things. And then, so that was, and we used that site for the benefit but what was extraordinary was that very established people came up because they owed Tarby for their the early part of their career, and the whole alternative comedy thing was taking off in London at that point, so they were doing very well. But everyone came up and just did perform for, to try and pay this ludicrous bill that was notional. How anyone thought you ever had money, I haven't the faintest idea. And the other thing you did, I remember, there's so much, but I remember from you is the kids fairs. Because you book.
When you got that tax bill, was there no way of contesting it?
Well, I think I probably did. I can't think that I'd even think of paying it. It was a lot of money, wasn't it?
Okay. Yeah, we wouldn't be sitting
So
there.
they got. So you must have. Like, were you drawing down money from the councils and arts councils to fund all these events, or
No.
was it ticket sales? Or?
Ticket sales.
So they've got it in their heads that you were making far more than you were.
Yeah.
And they wouldn't have it that they were wrong.
No.
VAT or something. Basically, they all run at a loss. For many years.
So,
John Cooper Clark came and helped you out with that, didn't he?
Yep.
yeah, yeah. Loads of people just came.
Yep.
Yeah.
So you paid it then?
Paid it.
Yeah. You paid the tax bill.
I think I had to.
I think that event, which was totally cash only and off the books, and no one knew it, hadn't paid the bill. Hopefully, because expensive. I think we did it on. I mean, all the equipment was there already. None of the performers wanted paying because it was like we'd already been paid years before. But the kids fairs were amazing because it was all young performers, and there was you booked musical youth, didn't you? Just before they broke.
Yep.
So, and by the time they were on, they had their big hit with Pass the Duchy, and so that was a draw. That was good. That was great. But I remember there was there was a young funk band, and most of them were from school at Acton. But I remember one of the guys was in Keswick. There was a young sort of offenders places at Kessingland, quite near, and they but it wasn't closed, it was open, and there was, so people come from there. I think they brought one of the officers brought a crew over or something, maybe help, but certainly one of the singers from I think the lead singer from the funk band I put on was banged up in Kessingland at the time, and he was allowed out to come and perform at the kids fair, providing he got back with the right time. No paperwork involved. It was that, but of course, and it was very effective. Yeah, I mean, it was one. Yeah, I'd met lots of people that had been there, so of course, because it was effective, it was closed down. I think it was council run or something, and and then and of course, Sarah and people were, and her friends were all of that age, weren't they? Where they could be, sort of teenage performers. Sarah we keep mentioning Sarah. Sarah is Tarby's daughter, and who now is doing quite a lot, involved with Weird and Wonderful Word and promoting herself. She's the one who's taken the mantle as much as, and so where was I? I was at Kids Fair. Yeah, and they was and I had a group of youngsters in Ipswich who wanted, was especially one who was trying to get his foot as a professional actor, who's a clerk. Can't remember his first name. He was a clerk, and so I wrote a play. When we performed it there, and we performed it at Murrayside Youth Club. Ludicrous play. I'd found out about this historic character that had, for a bet, had taken a paper mache boat from something like Southwark Bridge in London in the 16th century or 1600s to the Isle of Sheppey. And also it was to raise, I liked it because the reason he did that was also to raise consciousness about pollution in the Thames. So this was, I quite like that historical thread of running material from the 1600s, and he kept it afloat by inflating pigs' bladders, and of course the paper mache. So we wrote a whole play about this and just performed it twice. But one of the places was the Kids Fair, because that's where young performers could actually show off. So that was fantastic. And then you were just sending people everywhere, weren't you? The walkabout becomes a commonplace throughout. You're sending them up for the launch of Harry Potter at Edinburgh Castle, and then and all the side performers at the Millennium Dome. I did one for you there. I remember my brakes failed on the Bedford CF on the way down there, and
You said, John, that this was the beginning of your career as a storyteller. How did that progress?
well, I just Tarby started booking me through around her events, and then you kind of, it was going back to your own people in some ways, because I'd sort of done the the stuff subsidized based and arts and everything, and that just, I found that could just go away. So you go back to your own people. So people like Strawberry Fair, and at Strawberry Fair I was talking to Tony Cordy and said, it's discussing an old hippie like me, never done Glastonbury, and so he said, I'm running Green Kids this year, and he takes me down there, and I've been doing Glastonbury ever since and running the storytelling area there. So all that stuff really comes from that one comment. I think that one comment, and to get some publicity that year, I saw Charlie Mannings, who runs the fairground in Felixstowe, and I said, Charlie, you need publicity, I need publicity, so I'm going to busk in your fairground all summer, and we'll get the East Anglian Daily Times to write an article on. So I kind of artificially created. You can't get work by sitting indoors and just saying, why is no one phoning me up? You have to get out there, and that's, I think, goes back to some of the other interviews we've done. It's almost that legacy of punk and sort of the 60s stuff where you do it yourself. It's very much a do-it-yourself culture.
Do you see like a common thread there through all some of the conversations? The idea of community relying on itself, doing stuff for yourself, that intertwined network of subcultures kind of supporting each other. That all seems to be coming across, yeah.
So and Tarby's managed to do the whole thing really without subsidy, haven't you? You've never, I don't think there's ever been an Arts Council grant, has there, or anything like
I
that?
don't think so. I think I've applied quite a few times.
That shaking of the head says everything.
So, if you don't, and then the two local events that really kept going was the New Year's Eve in the village hall down the road.
Yeah.
And there's been some amazing people performing through there over the years, and that was kind of cabaret, and there was always a band, but there'd be cabaret performers as well, and then the one that is still going, that is very much a Tarby legacy, is Weird and Wonderful Wood, which is would you care to describe Weird and Wonderful Wood?
Well, it's been running for 24 years now. And it's progressed enormously. People coming from all over, Scotland and Wales and all sorts of places, not just local people and performers. In fact, they're coming from abroad. A few are coming from abroad. There was some wood sculptors from Belgium and things. Was it last year? I don't know. A couple of years ago, I'm not
I think
sure.
it stems from your wood in the back garden, though, doesn't it? It's a sort of mixture of that and the events, really. That's how bread and butter, isn't it? Furniture dealing, as it were. Come on to that, but it's more of a fairs feel sort of event, isn't it? Craft fairs.
Yeah, but and I think that was that's the difference between, because we've had loads of discussion back at the day. We had loads of discussion. What is the difference between the fair and the festival? The festival, the centre of the festival is the main stage. I think we're being simplistic here, but the fairs, the stages were quite small that are an integral part. You came across the stages as you go around, and lots of stuff was going on between, so the stalls between with weird and wonderful wood. There's craftsmen working. There's craftsmen selling their wooden stuff. There's the gypsy caravans. It's kind of anything wood related, and within that is the performance areas. So the performance areas aren't separated out. It wasn't, it's like we're not going to the main stage. On the way between this and this, we'll pass the stage and we'll have a look. Is that rough? Is that a fair description?
Yeah, unless there was sort of somebody big on,
Oh yes.
which people would turn up for, and when are they on?
Yeah, well, yeah, one of the late Ruffins had, what was it, Roy Harper was it Jimmy Page or one of those, that sort of, but it was always people that were interested in that anyway, and that's almost drawing them back on that, the folks. You never gave up the folk thing. It's always been a thread, or the acoustic music thing. It's been a thread through and that helps because of course you don't always need a stage, as we said before. They'll be on the stage and then be appearing around site. So that's and now that's still running. When did you retired? Sort of about a year before COVID, didn't you? And so you've kept up, and I strongly suspect you keep an eye on things as they're going now.
Well, I think so, but it was really funny because I was walking around at Needham Lakes this morning thinking, oh my God, how much it's changed. And there's now a big cafe there, and incredible. Whereas we had nothing, did we? Had to set everything up from scratch. Amazing.
Yeah. So, and of course, Weird and Wonderful Wood is still going, and Sarah's part of Sarah's the mainstay of that these days. When that was it 2 years ago or something, where they built a little dome and they put the Tarby throne inside. Because she got her MBE. Bless you, Liam. Yeah. So we set up, or I didn't, but Sarah set up Tarby on a throne inside this dome where people could come back. It's you've never taken yourself too serious, have you? You know,
What was your MBE for?
stuff we've been talking about, really.
Yeah.
Did they give you a title?
I don't even know what it's for. No, it didn't.
What was that microphone?
Oh, yes.
Where is it? So I'll go find it for you if you like.
It's there.
Oh, there you go.
Could you just get that back on a coat that held one?
Testing.
Perfect.
Right. We show it to the camera.
Does it say on there what it's for? It's, I think, just for the arts, you know.
Services to the arts.
Services to the arts. Yeah.
Yeah, so hold it a little bit so camera can see it.
Tilt it down. That's it. That's what it was.
Yeah. And I think that just, that does it. But that's where we are. And I can only thank you really for, keeping me and a lot of other people, I mean,
Sounds like you've got to thank her for starting 2 careers.
no, she was part of one career, which was the dealing side and the table and furniture dealing and furniture dealing. I used to say, and also because I had the bands, I'd occasionally we'd go round sort of. Between antique shops and stuff and doing all that, but so I think the thanks are for keeping a whole community going during that poor period of devastation, really, and managing to squeeze the odd penny out of other people, and also just this phenomenal contribution to the arts and keeping us artists alive. So thank you, Tarby.
You're welcome.